I don't think that kids knows how to handle them at this point in their life. They're lost. They don't know how to handle them, how to speak to them, how to treat them. Because a lot of times, too, some of the patients lash out at the kids.
Right. And there are also different types of medical history and mental health history, right? Alzheimer's can set in, dementia can set in, other comorbid chronic diseases set in as you grow older, which really brings me, that's a very good point about, and it sort of begs the question, do family members, loved ones, children who have aging parents, do they really know how to take care and what is required and expected of the need of that their elder parent? Which leads me to the other question. What has been your experience through your lens, the legal aspect of it, issues of representation, will, power of attorney? What has been your experience dealing with that, especially when you're dealing with patients who will die or have died in your care?
Well, one of the things that my responsibility as an aide was to request from the doctor the paperwork to get a DNR. If we don't have a DNR, it makes it difficult for us when we get the ambulance come in to take them to the hospitals. And so we always have it on display on the refrigerator to grab and go at all times. And I have had the experience with a brilliant son in New York whose mother made it known what her wishes were. Do not resuscitate. And I always keep the copy when I go to the hospital. And when she started coding and I called and the crash card came in and the doctor started working, and then he said to me, hold a second, does she have a DNR? I said, yes. He said, stop. And I took it out and I showed it to him. And I called the son right away and told him that she had gone. And he said, let them continue working. And I said, but they can't. Her wishes were, do not resuscitate. Okay. And it has to be honored. So he fought on that, but he didn't get anywhere with it because I had the paperwork to prove. So every patient they should talk to the kids, or the kids should talk to them about a DNR.
And it sort of goes back to that issue of communication, that issue of checking up, that issue of loneliness that the elders experience. What other legal issues? Because I know that when they pass away, you have to deal with now, what do you do with their possession? What challenges have you experienced around that in terms of the execution of the will and the family dynamics? What was that like?
Well, I would say most of them had wills and all that drawn up, so that for us, it depended on the patient. If the children were far away, and I would communicate with them beforehand what's happening and whatever. But all the jewelry and stuff goes back to the children. And usually they will say, get rid of the things. And I was paid, and alongside with whoever had to remove things, they were paid also to clear the apartments, clear it out. But jewelry usually will go back to the children. Yes.
What about the grandkids? Where do the grandkids fall into all this experience?
Well, yeah, it depends on how much the parent willing to let the kids get involved in their lives. Because what I do know, and this is something that everybody should know, is that when these wonderful patients send gifts to the grandchildren, I tell you, more than half of them do not respond. And then the grandparent the elderly patient will be there. Did they get it? Did they get it? They'll call the kids, and the kids will say, oh, I don't know. Let me find out if they got the present, especially if it was money. And then they had to force the kids to call the grandparents and let them know, well, they receive it. Thank you very much. But I saw this happening with all my patients.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Parents really have to be on top of the grandchildren because they love their grandchildren a lot.
Wow, that's very sad to hear that.
It's very sad to hear that, and it happens all the time.
Wow.
And it'll keep happening.
Wow. What any outstanding legal issues that you had to experience with the children and the elder elder parent and you in between?
But I had an issue here. It was much of a legal, wonderful gentleman, one of the best I've worked with. And he found out he had cancer, so he told me do not let his children know. Now, I was caught in the middle, but I could not disobey his wishes.
Uh-huh.
And one day she went to the doctor with me, and she heard the doctor say, well, now that you have this, and she said, what do you mean he has this? And the doctor said, well, he has this. And she didn't speak to me again until even after he passed away. I never heard from her again. She was mad at me. But I did say, he said to me, I cannot tell his children. I could not break his trust. I could not. It's HIPAA. I could not.
Right.
And it's very hard when you're caught in that situation, when they sway you to secrecy. But it depends how far you're willing to go. I did not tell her because the doctors knew, he knew, and it was his to tell the children.
Right.
And he did not want them. And he told me, he said, I don't want them crying and making a fuss and doing what they forced them to do what they're not doing. So that was something that was hard for me, and it was personal for me.
So tell me about the financial situation or dynamics with families. And I know you said that you worked with families that were upper middle class and they were well to do. But as we know, all families have finance that they need to manage and to deal with. Some in a very good way, some in a not so good way. So what was that experience like? And that means when I say finance, I mean paying you as well as covering the cost for maintaining the house, the cost for any medical fees or co-payments or anything financial we can think about. What was that like?
Most of them, those who had dementia, they did not really handle the money as such. Most of it, they lived in condos or houses that were paid for. Money was coming out of their accounts. The children did manage some. I know one who was very wealthy, her son's super wealthy in New York, and she handed over the payment finances to him, and she never had late payment for her condo, her fees, and he started not paying them on time, and she was livid because she said it never happened before, and because she handed it over to him, look what happened. So when the kids got control of all the money, it became a little more difficult for them because they would say, I remember a patient saying to me, a child saying to me, well, we have to watch how the money is being spent now. She had the money. She saved all her life for that. And she never went to a restaurant in her life until I came on the scene. She was more like a miser, I would like to say. Wonderful human being. But then she asked me to take her out, and I started taking her out once per week, not to high-end restaurants. He did have a problem with that, and she said, that's my money, and I can do what I want with it, and everything. They have the money left for them, and let me enjoy myself and have fun. And she loved to eat.
Yeah.
That simple act when the son said, I would like you to not take her out as regularly. She was mad, and she said, no, that will not happen.
What you're saying is that the financial management becomes a burden for the children of the elderly parent.
Somewhat. I would like to say somewhat. But if it was running smoothly before, I don't see why there would be a problem for it to continue when they hand over the financial reins to the children.
Yes.
But in regards to salary, in South Florida, a couple of years ago, caregivers were not being paid as much, and the parents expected for us to work for their wages. And I had to speak to a parent or a child about that before. I said, no, this is what happens, and this is how much it costs. And if you go elsewhere, they may charge you more, and you may not get the same care. So there are times when the children try to hold back on the money and don't want to spend, but that's what the parents save for.
So now, when you think of repairs, I remember for me, we had to have money aside for property taxes, insurance, and repairs on the house as well, because you got to maintain wherever you live, right? If something breaks, you got to hire a plumber. If it's a house and you're up in Northeast, you have to pay for snow and lawn and care and etc. So did you have to handle that as well in terms of finding the service workers or the lawn guy or the plumber, electrician, or was that already taken care of by the kids of the elderly parent?
No, well, most of these patients had everything set up because they had contracts with companies who they pay a monthly, a yearly fee to come in to fix the refrigerator, whatever. So that was one thing that was dealt with. And even if it had to come out of pocket, a lot of them, I had access to checks that I could write a check out, or I had a card I could go and pay for certain things and on behalf of the patient.
Okay.
I wasn't very comfortable with that because I didn't like handling finances. I preferred the children do that because I didn't want any conflicts.
Yeah. So why don't you share with me some of the sort of takeaway messages? Like how has that sort of your experience helped you to plan for your golden days or ages?
Well, one of the big things now at 69, I am trying to get rid of things in my house. Because I know when I go, the children may call the dumpster. To get rid of things, myself and my husband. So we started already downsizing, giving away things to people who really will use them, and trying very hard financially to make sure that just in case whatever has to happen, money will be there to take care of it.
Yes, that's
trying not to let the children know. Yeah, a lot of burden.
Yeah, that's what I'm learning is that a lot of families, what they're doing, families who are informed and experienced, are trying to reduce the burden of for their loved ones after they pass away. We reduce the burden from their kids by doing that, by what's the word you used? Decluttering. Downsizing. Downsizing, yes, downsizing. So, in terms of a lot of families and a lot of families that you take care of or took care of, it seemed as though they had wills and trust and executors and things of that nature. And how does that, did you learn from that experience as well for yourself to prepare yourself? Were you that engaged or did you not understand that sort of process?
Well, I understood to a point.
Okay.
And I have really been a little lax in going forward with whatever plans I have to make or we have to make going forward. And especially with wills and all that stuff. But I'll be able to get on that as soon as possible because I don't want the burden to be on the children. It'll be too much.
Yeah, so one of the things would encourage you to listen to the podcast, my previous podcast, because it talks about that. It talks about if you can't, for whatever reason, families think that they must spend thousands of dollars to go to an attorney to get these financial legal items or wills or trust or I think more so will and DNR and healthcare proxy in place. And you don't necessarily need to do that. So if you listen to some of the previous episodes, you'll hear about creative ways where elders as well as caretakers for elders, how they have dealt with it as well. So you don't I guess my point is that you don't have to be rich and powerful to have these systems in place. But I think what's important is that open communication, that sense of trust, and so that you know what you have to sort of protect you and to sort of secure that legacy, your hard work, your sacrifice for whatever little that you can leave, that you can sort of preserve that for the legacy of your family and the future generations. So, any other things you would like to sort of share based on your experience? Maybe best experience or best lessons learned?
I think I would like to leave with you all the fact that children have to listen to their parents, not just give them a hearing, just listen to what they have to say and be respectful of their wishes, even though you may not be as patient as you would like to be, but they really incredible people. And I don't, from my view, everybody has issues with their parents, some way or the other, but you just have to be as patient as possible because they're not going to be here for a long time.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. I think your story is absolutely wonderful. And I hope the listeners can take away not just one lesson, but many from your experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ganesh.